Imagine this, you're a single mom, no family to lean on, no safety net, just you and your kid trying to scrape by every day. You wake up every morning before dawn, already exhausted from the day before, and you wonder, how much longer can I hold on? Bills keep piling up. Your paycheck barely covers rent and groceries, and the looming shadow of eviction is closer than you dare admit. Your child's health depends on medications you can barely afford. Every cough, every wheeze tightens the knot in your stomach. You watch your kid struggle, and it breaks you, because there's nothing worse than feeling powerless, like you're failing the one person who depends on you most. You check your bank account, hoping for a miracle, but all you have left is $1,200. That's it. Your last bit of money, your final lifeline before you and your child become homeless. What would you do with it? Would you stash it away for a last desperate hotel stay? Try to squeeze it into rent for another month? Or would you do something crazy, something bold and terrifying, and use it to buy a rundown cabin nobody wants? That's exactly what Emma Davis did. When Emma first saw the listing for the old cabin on the auction site, she laughed. It looked like a scene straight out of a horror movie. Broken windows, a sagging roof, peeling paint, and weeds so thick they swallowed the front porch hole. No running water, no electricity, no signs of life for years. Everyone called it a lost cause, a liability no one would touch. But Emma, desperate and out of options, saw opportunity where others saw ruin. In a world that had already taken so much from her, her job, her savings, her dignity, she made a decision that shocked everyone around her. She took her last $1,200, the very last dollar she'd saved up after months of barely making ends meet, and she put it all on the line. She showed up to the county auction, surrounded by slick investors and house flippers with deep pockets and cold smiles. She was out of place, in worn shoes and a coat she'd bought secondhand. But she wasn't there to compete with them. She was there for one thing, to claim a future. Bidding started at $1,000. The room buzzed with tension. As the price climbed, Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She could see the doubt in her own eyes reflected in the polished faces around her. When it hit $1,100, it was down to her and a man who clearly wasn't interested in the small stakes she was playing with. With the room watching, Emma raised her hand and bid her absolute limit, $1,200. The man looked at her, surprised, then slowly lowered his hand. The auctioneer's gavel slammed down, and just like that, Emma was the proud owner of a cabin nobody else wanted. She walked out clutching the keys like a lifeline, not knowing what the next day would bring but knowing one thing for sure, she had made a choice. A choice to fight back against the impossible, to rewrite her story from the ground up. This wasn't just a house. It was a risk. A gamble. A spark of hope in the darkest moment of her life. And what Emma found inside that cabin would change everything, not just for her, but for so many others who had been forgotten, overlooked, and written off. Emma Davis's hands trembled as she gripped the rusted iron key. The chill morning air was sharp, biting against her skin as she stepped up to the porch of the cabin she had just bought. The place looked worse than she had imagined, more than worse, it looked like it had been abandoned for centuries. The faded white paint flaked off the wooden siding in long strips, revealing warped and rotting boards beneath. Ivy had swallowed the porch steps entirely, and a thick blanket of moss covered the roof, sagging in the middle like it was ready to cave in. Lily, her 10-year-old daughter, tugged nervously at Emma's sleeve, eyes wide as saucers. She'd been quiet most of the ride over, but the second they stepped outside the car, her face tightened with an expression Emma knew all too well, the struggle against an allergy attack. A dry cough escaped her lips, growing louder and more strained as they crossed the uneven ground toward the cabin. Emma's heart clenched. She wanted to pull Lily into her arms, to promise her that everything would be okay, but the truth was raw and unforgiving. This cabin, the skeleton of a house, could very well be the beginning of the end for them. With a shaking breath, Emma pushed open the front door. The creak echoed through the empty rooms like a warning. The smell hit them immediately, a choking blend of mildew, dust, and something else, a stale odor that spoke of years of neglect, closed windows, and forgotten secrets. The air was thick, as if the house was breathing its decay into their lungs. Dust floated in the golden beams filtering through the grime-covered windows. The floorboards groaned under Emma's weight, warning of their age and weakness. Broken shards of glass glittered like deadly jewels in the corners, while torn, moldy wallpaper curled at the edges, peeling away from walls scarred by water damage. Lily coughed again, this time sharper and more desperate. Emma quickly reached into her bag for the inhaler she carried everywhere now, a lifeline for her daughter's fragile lungs. The medication helped, but only barely. The dust and mold were relentless enemies. Emma's eyes darted around, taking in every detail. The kitchen was a rusted graveyard of appliances that hadn't worked in decades. The sink was clogged, stained with yellow grime. A cracked window above the sink rattled in the breeze, its frame swollen from years of rain. Upstairs, the bedrooms offered no refuge. The floorboards creaked treacherously, and the stale air made Lily's breathing worse. Emma wiped sweat from her brow, knowing this was only the beginning of an uphill battle, making this place livable, safe for her daughter, and a true home. But this physical decay was only half the story. Neighbors had told Emma snippets, whispers of the previous owner, Josephine Blackwood, a woman who had vanished without a trace some 30 years ago. Some said she'd been a healer, others that she was simply odd, secretive, someone who kept to herself. But the rumors hinted at darker truths, mysteries buried beneath the cabin's broken floors. Emma couldn't stop thinking about Josephine. Who was she? Why had she disappeared? What had happened here? That night, as Lily slept fitfully, Emma sat in the darkened cabin, staring at the faded floral wallpaper peeling in one corner. The house seemed to watch her, alive with silent stories she couldn't yet hear. Every creak and groan in the night set her nerves on edge. Was it just the house settling? Or was something, or someone, else here? Lily stirred suddenly, whispering about a woman in the window, a kind face watching over them. Emma forced herself to believe it was just a child's imagination, a coping mechanism in a strange place. But even as she reassured her daughter, Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. Days blurred as Emma juggled work, childcare, and the overwhelming task of cleaning and repairing the cabin. Every sweep of the broom sent clouds of dust into the air that worsened Lily's cough. Every patch of mold she found was a threat to her daughter's health. Emma made calls to specialists, trying to find help, but with no money, no credit, and a growing stack of bills, the options were slim. At night, Emma pored over journals and letters she found tucked away in the cabin, relics of Josephine's life. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, filled with notes on herbs, remedies, and cryptic warnings. One journal entry chilled Emma: "If I disappear, my work must be protected." Emma didn't know what work Josephine was talking about, but the sense of urgency was real. Emma's determination hardened. This cabin, this broken shell, was no ordinary house. It was a puzzle, a secret, a story waiting to be told. And she was going to uncover it, not just for herself, but for Lily, and for the woman who had vanished in its shadow. Every night brought new questions and new dangers. Mysterious visitors stopped by, offering money, threats veiled behind smiles. The weight of unseen eyes watching from the trees made Emma jumpy. But she stood firm. The cabin was theirs now. And whatever secrets it held, they would face them head-on. Days turned into weeks, but Emma's resolve never wavered. Despite the constant battles with the cabin's decay and Lily's worsening health, Emma plunged deeper into the mystery surrounding Josephine Blackwood and the strange cabin. It started with a loose floorboard in the corner of what would be Lily's bedroom. One afternoon, while clearing away decades of dust and debris, Emma noticed the plank shifted under her foot. Curiosity piqued, she carefully pried it up with a screwdriver borrowed from a neighbor. Beneath the plank was a shallow cavity containing a small metal box, tarnished and worn, but locked with a simple latch. Heart pounding, Emma lifted it out. The box was heavier than she expected. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth, lay a leather-bound journal, a bundle of faded photographs, and an ornate brass key, an odd, intricate thing with delicate filigree. Emma's hands shook as she opened the journal. The pages were brittle, the ink faded but still legible. The handwriting was neat and meticulous, a woman's hand, disciplined and purposeful. The journal belonged to Josephine. As Emma read, she was transported into Josephine's world, a brilliant botanist and herbalist who had left behind a promising career to build a secluded life studying medicinal plants on the very land Emma now owned. The entries detailed experiments, notes on rare flora, and most intriguingly, hints at a revolutionary medical discovery. Josephine had been working on isolating compounds from a native plant that showed remarkable promise against a devastating autoimmune disease, one that modern medicine had yet to conquer. But the deeper Emma delved, the clearer it became that Josephine's work had threatened powerful interests. The journal spoke of repeated visits from a mysterious man, a corporate emissary who pressed Josephine to sell her research. She refused. The last entries grew darker, filled with warnings, fear, and a resolve to protect her discovery at any cost. Emma's breath caught as she realized the stakes. Josephine hadn't simply vanished, she had been silenced. Determined, Emma searched the cabin for more clues, guided by the journal's hints. In the overgrown garden out back, she found remnants of carefully tended herb beds, now wild and tangled but unmistakably cultivated. With the brass key in hand, Emma ventured into a collapsed greenhouse, hidden behind thick vines. Inside, beneath a pile of broken glass and rotting wood, she discovered a rusted metal door set into the earth, a hidden cellar or lab. Her pulse quickened. This was no ordinary property. Using the key, Emma unlocked the door, revealing a steep staircase descending into darkness. Inside, she found a small laboratory preserved in eerie silence. Dust-covered glass jars lined the shelves, filled with dried plant specimens. Scattered notebooks contained detailed chemical formulas, experimental results, and molecular diagrams, research decades ahead of its time. A microscope sat in one corner, remarkably intact, and a locked metal safe beckoned ominously. Emma's mind reeled. This was Josephine's secret sanctuary, the birthplace of a medical breakthrough that could change lives. But it also explained the danger that followed her, why mysterious strangers had started showing up, offering large sums of money to buy the cabin. Big Pharma wanted Josephine's research buried, forgotten forever. Emma's discovery thrust her into a world she'd never imagined, one of corporate greed, conspiracy, and a fight for justice that was far bigger than her own struggle. She wasn't just fighting for a home anymore. She was fighting for truth, for her daughter's future, and for the countless lives that Josephine's work could save. Just as Emma began to feel the fragile first glimmers of hope, the shadows lurking beyond the cabin's cracked windows moved closer. It wasn't long before the true weight of what she'd stumbled upon came crashing down, and it came not in whispers or rumors, but in cold, unyielding threats cloaked in smiles and veiled warnings. It started innocently enough, with a knock on the cabin door one rainy afternoon. Emma had been sorting through Josephine's journals again when she opened the door to find a sharply dressed man standing there, rain dripping from the brim of his expensive hat. His smile was polished, his voice smooth like oil, but Emma's gut twisted with unease. "I'm from Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals," he said, flashing a business card with the company's gleaming logo. "We're very interested in the property you've acquired. We believe there's potential there, botanical specimens that could be of immense value." Emma's eyes narrowed. "I'm not interested in selling." The man's smile didn't waver. "We're prepared to make you a very generous offer, one that would secure your family's future many times over." Over the following days, the visits multiplied. Luxury cars with tinted windows appeared on the dirt road leading to the cabin. More men in tailored suits showed up, bearing gifts of cash, tempting offers, and veiled threats. "Think carefully," one warned, voice low and almost conspiratorial. "Some things are better left buried." Emma refused every offer. The research wasn't just property, it was Josephine's legacy, a beacon of hope for patients who had no other options. And more than that, it was now her fight. But the pressure escalated. Strange incidents began to plague the family. One morning, Emma found the water in the trailer's tap running brown and foul-smelling. Another time, Lily's inhaler, the very device that kept her breathing, was tampered with, filled with nothing but water. The threats weren't just financial anymore. They were personal. Emma's car tires were slashed, and one night, someone cut the brake lines, a terrifying act that could have ended in tragedy. Despite police reports, the investigations were slow, dismissive. Local authorities seemed reluctant to challenge the powerful forces behind the scenes. Emma's world tightened into a cage of fear and determination. One evening, a phone call chilled her to the bone, a voice she didn't recognize warning her to abandon the property before it was too late. But Emma stood firm. With each act of intimidation, her resolve only strengthened. She wasn't alone. A local contractor named Sam, who had once worked for Josephine, offered help without asking for a dime. A retired nurse who had known Josephine's work reached out, sharing what little she knew. Together, they formed a small but fierce alliance, fighting not just for a cabin, but for justice. Emma's discovery had awakened a sleeping giant, and the battle lines were drawn. The stakes were no longer just about a neglected cabin in the woods, but a medical breakthrough worth billions, a breakthrough that the world needed, but a powerful few wanted to keep hidden at any cost. Emma knew the road ahead would be perilous. But she also knew that some fights were worth every risk. And this was one of them. The threats had escalated to a breaking point. Emma knew she couldn't face the looming storm alone. The weight of protecting not just a crumbling cabin, but the legacy of Josephine's groundbreaking work, pressed heavier every day. It wasn't just about her and Lily anymore, it was about the truth, buried beneath layers of corruption and greed. Thankfully, Emma wasn't alone. Sam, the contractor who had offered his help from the start, had become more than just a handyman. His years of local knowledge and unwavering loyalty were a lifeline. Then there was Clara, the retired nurse who once cared for Josephine during her final years, her memory a vital link to the past. And then came Sarah, an investigative journalist known for taking on stories others wouldn't dare touch. Together, they formed an unlikely team, bound by a shared sense of justice and a burning determination to shine a light on the conspiracy that threatened to bury the truth forever. The first step was securing the evidence. Emma, Sam, and Clara worked tirelessly to document every piece of Josephine's research hidden in the cabin's secret lab, the notebooks filled with formulas, the faded photographs, the haunting voice recordings revealing corporate threats against Josephine. Sarah began piecing together a narrative, connecting dots between Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals and years of suspicious disappearances and cover-ups. But they knew it wasn't enough. To truly expose the web of deceit, they needed the law on their side. Emma reached out to the federal agents she had quietly contacted months ago, agents with experience in corporate fraud and corruption. The investigation, once dormant, sprang to life. Federal agents swept through the region, carefully collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, and building a case that would rock the pharmaceutical giant to its core. Emma sat in a small conference room with Sarah, Sam, Clara, and the lead agent, feeling the weight of what they had uncovered. "We're looking at decades of deliberate sabotage," the agent said grimly. Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals has systematically crushed research that threatened their bottom line. Josephine Blackwood's work was the most significant discovery, and it nearly cost her her life. The room fell silent. For Emma, the fight was deeply personal, the threats against Lily, the countless nights wondering if they'd be safe, the sacrifices she'd made. But now, with allies beside her, the tide was turning. Sarah's exposé hit the front pages nationwide, unmasking the dark underbelly of the pharmaceutical empire. Public outrage swelled, and calls for justice echoed through the halls of power. Emma's courage, bolstered by the steadfast support of Sam, Clara, Sarah, and the federal agents, was a beacon for all who had been silenced or ignored. In a courtroom packed with journalists and supporters, the truth was finally laid bare. The pharmaceutical executives faced charges not only for corporate misconduct but for the sinister lengths they'd gone to suppress life-saving research. And as the gavel struck, signaling a hard-won victory, Emma felt a profound sense of relief and resolve. Her home, once a symbol of desperation, had become a fortress of hope and justice. Josephine's legacy, preserved and honored, would now help heal lives rather than destroy them. Emma smiled, tears in her eyes, knowing that sometimes, the greatest battles lead to the most extraordinary triumphs. The courtroom buzz had faded, replaced by a quiet morning sun spilling through the newly repaired windows of the cabin. Emma stood on the porch, breathing deeply, the crisp air filling her lungs with a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The truth had been laid bare for all to see. Radcliffe Pharmaceuticals and its executives were held accountable for decades of greed and corruption, their attempts to silence Josephine Blackwood finally exposed. It was a victory not just for Emma and Lily, but for every patient who would benefit from the medical breakthrough Josephine had sacrificed so much to protect. The cabin itself, once a crumbling relic of neglect, had been lovingly restored. Volunteers from the community, inspired by Emma's story, had pitched in, painting walls, clearing gardens, fixing roofs. The once overgrown orchard now blossomed with fragrant herbs and fruit trees, a living tribute to Josephine's legacy. Most importantly, Lily's health improved. The clean air, the healing gardens, and the love that filled their home made all the difference. Her coughs became less frequent, her laughter returned, and the bright sparkle in her eyes was a daily reminder of hope reborn. Emma hadn't stopped there. Fueled by the memory of Josephine's unwavering commitment, she founded the Blackwood Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing affordable, accessible medical research rooted in nature's wisdom. The foundation partnered with ethical researchers and practitioners, ensuring Josephine's discoveries would reach those who needed them most. Emma's journey, from desperate single mom with a handful of dollars to guardian of a life-saving secret, became a beacon of courage and resilience. Her story reminded everyone that even in the darkest moments, bravery and faith could transform lives. As Emma watched Lily run through the orchard, sunlight dancing in her hair, she knew they had found something more than a home. They had found a future. There's a moment in every story, the kind that lingers long after the last word is spoken, when you realize this isn't just someone else's journey. It's a reflection of something deeper inside all of us. A spark of courage that, even in the darkest hours, refuses to be extinguished. Emma Davis was just a woman with a daughter and a handful of dollars. A cracked-down cabin and a mountain of impossible odds. But through every sleepless night, every breathless worry, every moment when giving up seemed easier than moving forward, she held on. Not just for herself. Not just for Lily. But for the truth. For justice. For the countless lives that Josephine Blackwood's discovery would save. Her story is a testament to the power of one person's refusal to be broken. To the strength found in fighting not only for survival, but for something greater. When Emma finally stood on the porch of the restored cabin, watching the sunlight catch in the leaves of the orchard, she wasn't just a survivor. She was a warrior. A guardian. A beacon. Because courage isn't about never feeling fear, it's about facing it head-on. Justice isn't just a word, it's a promise to those who've been silenced. And hope? Hope is the fire that burns brightest when everything else fades away. This story isn't just about a cabin or a medical breakthrough. It's about the unstoppable spirit inside all of us. The belief that even when the world turns its back, we can rise. We can fight. We can change everything. Emma's journey from desperation to empowerment reminds us, no matter how dark the night, dawn always breaks. And with it comes a new chance to rebuild, to heal, and to shine. So when you feel lost, remember Emma. Remember Josephine. Remember the power of hope and the courage to stand tall. Because sometimes, the smallest voices tell the loudest stories.